Hi everyone, I'm Zlad Dujsic, and today I'm here with Geoffrey Campbell of Oro Station to give you a little bit of an update on the project, but also share some story and some vision behind Oro Station. So, Geoffrey, let's start with yourself. Tell us about you and your connection to the automotive world.
So my connection to the automotive world is pretty basic in that I just grew up loving cars. From a young age, my dad was always at the Molson Indy, so I was that baby in the pit lane, and I think that's really where it got into my veins. There's stories of Peter Lockhart, chairman of the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame, whose house was behind ours when I was in a crib. So I used to try and get up and look out the window to see when his cars were out there or what he was working on. But generally how I came to Oro Station is that my background's in construction. My mother's an architect, I grew up in the field. And so I've been really fortunate that this is an intersection of my career in construction and development, along with my passion and hobby of racing in cars.
It's always great when someone finds their passion and their career path find that, harmonious intersection. So tell us more. What's the story of Oro Station then?
So the story, it's an interesting concept in that we've seen it popping up around North America. There's been a number of these club track facilities that have opened. They look very much like a golf course where members are getting together to go racing. But expanding on it, when we look at what's going on over in Europe with places like Bicester Heritage or the Silverstone Business Park, the industry in motorsport and in classic cars is sort of rallying around these facilities as well. And so with Oro Station, we saw an opportunity and a need in the market to create a new home for all things automotive in Canada. So it's been a really fun project to put these pieces together. How do you both attract that club driving element as well as expand it to the wider enthusiast community? And I think we've done a good job of that at Oro.
So that's great. You mentioned a couple of these other facilities in Europe and some here in North America. Can you let us know about the differentiator for Oro Station?
Yeah, well, I think these other facilities that are around, they sort of focus on one end user group. So we've seen developments that are pure condominium garages where it's about storage and places for people to keep their cars. We've seen the racing clubs that are more focused on just the pure racing and getting out on track. But what made Oro different was that we took a bit of an ecosystem approach to it. And so much the way a ski resort operates, where they have a hill with private chalets and a village for everyone in the public, we have a racetrack with condominium garages and a campus that's open to the public. And by creating that balance of an ecosystem, we've created an atmosphere that encourages the whole spectrum of automotive enthusiasts to be part of this project and really creates a home base for everyone in the automotive community.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I think an ecosystem approach is important, right? To have the holistic kind of pieces for everyone.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, and I think a lot of people don't realize how big the automotive sector is here in Ontario. It's a really big part of our economy. Now, traditionally, that's made up of large manufacturing facilities, plants, etc. But what we're approaching is more on the innovation side, on the classic car restoration, the racing side. And so given the size and the scale of that industry here, given the size and scale of our enthusiast community, coming out with something that isn't just sort of going after one user group, but is really creating that home across that spectrum, it's a really powerful piece. So that was something really important to us for how we were approaching Oro Station. How do we support innovation, the economics of the automotive sector here in Ontario, while accommodating all the different enthusiasts that, whatever flavor of vehicles that they're into, whether it's new technology or historics, as well as providing that opportunity for the racing enthusiasts, the club drivers, to be able to get out and use their cars as they were designed on track.
Right on. So tell me more then, how did this get started? Like, where do you start to begin building not just a racetrack, but a whole ecosystem for the automotive world?
To a degree, there's an element of preparation, but there's also an element of luck in that I saw that gap in the market here in Ontario. I saw the opportunity as these tracks were popping up in remote jurisdictions around North America, but really it was about finding the right piece of land. And so when I moved back to Canada in 2017, I stumbled across the property that is now Oro Station and realized this is that 1 in a million property. And so it really provided the opportunity to say, hey, let's take a real look at this thing. And from there, it was more a case of just putting one foot in front of the other, seeing, could we get industry support, government support, local community support for what we were doing in the vision. And we were really fortunate that at every turn, we found nothing but welcoming arms in terms of people being excited for what we were proposing and what we wanted to build.
Well, it's good to hear. Yeah, it's a lot coming to the region, and Seems like it's being well supported, so it's good to hear.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think there some of the key parts that made it so significant was predominantly the Lake Simcoe Regional Airport. So the fact that we're across the street from an airport with international customs made it incredible because it means that we've got a good neighbor. And so naturally there was a fit in that the government is looking for industry and jobs and growth to be around that airport. But with what we're doing in automotive and motorsport, it's complementary, and so we're really good neighbors. And so I think that was probably the most key piece of it. There were a number of others that sort of came together at the right time, but that was the part that made it such an opportunity.
Right, and as you said, finding the land has been almost serendipitous, right? You find land across the street from an international airport. I'm sure there's some sort of noise kind of factors in play that help you guys get going here. And
yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look around North America, the number of tracks that are currently under threat due to noise, and we understand, like, as populations grow, people start to live closer to existing tracks, and suddenly it's oil and water. And so we've seen this with circuits all over the place that are suddenly dealing with neighbors complaining, even though the circuits were there first. In our case, because our neighbor is an international airport that's in the midst of some massive growth in terms of new tenants, new airlines coming in, new corporate planes. So it meant that we fit together really well. And so that noise thing doesn't become an issue because they have noise, we have noise, and together they're well suited to be next to one another.
So you've mentioned an ecosystem, and that might sound complicated as to how all the pieces work together and all the different things happening at the same time. So walk us through, what would a day at Oro Station look like?
Yeah, well, I mean, ultimately, once this place is fully built out, you've got that campus that's on the east side of the property, you've got the circuit at the heart of the property, and you've got a members club on the west side. And so on a typical weekday, you've got members that are out at that racing club just like they would if at a golf course. They're coming out, they're racing their cars, they've got them in their storage buildings, maybe they're working on restoring a cherished classic. On the east side of the property, though, that campus, you've got innovation companies working on new hydrogen fuel cell tech or on autonomous vehicles or EV technology. You've got students at Georgian College that are in campus learning in their automotive service tech. And the businesses in there, they're working with one another. So a classic car restoration shop might be working with the engine builder next door. They're working on somebody from the Publix car. You've got people coming in to get winter tires put on or their oil changed, or maybe they're just dropping by to the museum. And so during the week, you're seeing a sort of hive of activity that's happening on that site. But come the weekends, suddenly that same campus that was an industrial park Monday to Friday morphs into more of an experiential zone, meaning that you will see car clubs coming into the paddocks for cars and coffee on the weekend. Porsche Club might be in paddock A, Mustang Club might be in paddock B. Skid Pad may have a manufacturer out there launching a new vehicle or doing demonstrations to teach people about new automotive technologies. And so it becomes this place that is not just business to business through the tenancies that are in that park, but also engaging with that wider community, whether that be people that are new to the automotive world or people that have loved it and been in it for a long time. So it's a place that it's meant to, throughout the week, it's evolving, it's changing, but at the heart of it, it's all around the center of automotive in terms of being whatever you could think of. That innovation elements, those are all happening there concurrently.
That's really exciting. I mean, I think the best analogy is that it's a ski town for automotive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the easiest way to picture it in terms of understanding how it functions and fits together. But a lot of people who go skiing, they love skiing. But I would argue there's even more people that love cars.
Yeah. So tell us, who's on this journey with you? Tell us more about the people and the partners that have helped bring this to fruition.
So, I mean, there's a bit of a complicated answer to that in the sense that there's, my partner Dan, who is somebody that was an ardent believer in what I was doing from day one. My family, who have been a part of it all the way along. Although I think they thought I was pretty crazy in the start. Now they're coming around to seeing how this is all going to work and how it's coming together. But the reality is that who's on the journey with me is the entire automotive community. And so it's important for people to know that while I am the developer and very fortunate to be going through the steps right now of giving birth to this project in the form of bringing it to life, it really is made up by the businesses in automotive, the racers, the enthusiasts, the people that are going to come and ultimately use this facility. Their involvement is what makes the whole thing possible. And so, that means that the tenants that have already come in and signed on and been announcing, they are working through ways of what does their involvement look like? How can we morph the vision a bit to suit their businesses, their needs better? The enthusiasts that are talking about or attending events or out in the community, excited for the future of this place. And then obviously that club element, those members are a very critical piece. They're our patrons. So by them being there and joining the racing club, they're the foundation of what builds that racetrack. And so, they've been incredible in the sense that they believe in this thing enough to invest in the future of this facility to be able to have it built for the sake of everyone. So it's something I've been really honored by the amount of support that's come from the different facets of the community, and how excited they are to be involved and put in their 2 cents of how this thing can work and suit their needs best to make that ecosystem function as best as possible.
All right, so we've talked about the vision. Now let's talk about the timelines and really getting this all done. Can you let us know a bit more about from concept to construction? How's it been? What are the milestones? And just kind of feed into that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the construction and development in Canada can be tough. I mean, we've seen it through a number of the different sectors in terms of the timing for permits approvals. We were really fortunate that because this property was tied to the airport, it's the Lake Simcoe Regional Economic Employment District, it meant that we, through provincial support, were able to move through the first steps fairly quickly and with lots of support. We had unanimous support at Oro Medonte Council, at Simcoe County Council before we went to the province, who ultimately gave us the zoning. But zoning is something that zoning was in 2019 that we received that. And a lot of people sort of think, well, that's it, it's approved. But that's really just the first step. And so from there, we had to then start working through stakeholder approvals, through detailed design, engineering, environmental, to get to the subsequent phases of the project.
And that's all been kind of moving step by step, it seems. And
it has, yeah. So I mean, specific timelines, zoning was 2019, and obviously 2020 we were all hit by the pandemic, which was a great reminder for why we should get out and explore our passions, after spending all that time locked at home. In our case, it actually worked to our benefit because it meant that we could focus on the engineering. So while our engineers were at home, they were all going through detailed design and drawings and getting through how's this thing going to function within the regulatory framework. And so we spent 2020 and 2021 going through that detailed design in order to satisfy things like the Ministry of Environment or the Conservation Authority or all these various stakeholders that needed to be part of the project. Ultimately, by 2022, we received what's called the site plan approval. And site plan approval is that registered on title permission to now go and start constructing. So that's where you sort of saw us move into a different phase of earthworks. However, that came just as Bank of Canada and started hiking interest rates to combat inflation. And so we sort of got to a point where we had hit the approval, but the market now dictated that we had to slow down a bit. Now what you're seeing is us sort of resuming into full-scale work again, and which we're really excited to be back doing. But it's been something that's been interesting to have to plan around and strategize and make sure we can accommodate.
Certainly. Yeah, but as a lead on the project, you get these curveballs, but it hasn't really deterred the team. You've been able to work through them, work around them. And like you said, there's a big community support in the project, so the needle keeps moving.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think in terms of a project of this size and this scale means that you have to design it around market cycles, meaning that when you're building something like a townhome project, when the market's good, you get in the ground, you get it built, you get the project finished. But Oro is going to be here for the next 100 years. And so we have to be able to adapt and work around the cycles of a market in order to continue to be able to deliver it. It doesn't make it easier. In fact, it makes it infinitely harder, but it's something you have to have in your thought processes as you're designing a project of this size. I mean, what we see on the plan now is just the first 200 acres. We're almost 600 acres of land out here. And so we know that there's many, many years of growth and development for this facility.
That's fantastic. Long-term vision, thinking, planning. You're the right guy for the job.
I mean, yeah, I don't know if I'd be so quick to say it. I think I've been really fortunate with my background that I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. I was the son of an architect. I grew up in development. I worked in resorts throughout the Caribbean. And so I've done, both remote complex projects for how do you get something done in a place that doesn't have the right services and is sort of hard to get to. I've worked in planning, I've worked in design. So I've been really fortunate that the culmination of my experiences did put me in a position that I could approach something like this. But I don't for one second think that it's all me, in the sense that, as I mentioned before about the overall community embracing the project in terms of where we're going. But also even just the people that are with me day to day, working through it, the consulting teams, the people that are trying to build something that's not very typical. It's not something they work on every day. With the exception of Driven, our track architects from the UK, this is new territory to everyone. And so it's been something that I've been fortunate that my background has put me in a position to be able to understand a project like this, but having the right team around me has been crucial in terms of being able to actually execute on it.
Right, so you mentioned a 100-year vision for Oro Station. How do you plan or build something to factor in all the market conditions and market cycles that you're going to approach?
It's really, there's two parts to it. There's a long-term and a short-term approach. So in the long-term approach, we had to take a very careful look at how's Oro Station going to function? How's this place going to operate day to day? And so examples of that were the club, for example, that we mentioned, it's Bexley Motor Club. So that's been structured as a nonprofit corporation. So like a condo corporation, there's no shareholders. The members join, they buy their initial membership, they pay their annual dues, but that asset, that facility is part of a nonprofit. And so as a nonprofit, and I should add the distinction, that does not mean a charity, it means that it exists not to benefit any one individual. It's there to further itself only by its goals and its charters, and becomes a revenue neutral thing. So the members who are there and are participating, their initial investments go into the investment of the actual racetrack itself. Their annual dues go into contributing to the maintenance of that track. But there isn't, one person who's making money off of that racetrack in that club. That's all a community of racers together that are coming together to form that facility, which creates the heart of Oro Station. On the condo side, so we mentioned that there are some condo garages there. Those very members have the opportunity to purchase garages that they now get to own, and they can keep their cars there. And now, as part of being at the club, they keep their cars right on site, right beside the racetrack. Kind of like owning a boathouse in Muskoka, where they're keeping their cars right there. Right. But then on the campus side of it, we've structured it in a similar approach to how a shopping mall would be done. So the facility has retained ownership of the whole campus, and that allows us to curate the tenancies in there so that we can make sure we've got the right suppliers that are in there that provide top-notch service to both the clients on property and the general public. Make sure that we have a balance so you don't have 8 tire shops in a row. You've got the right mix of tenancies, and that's sort of some of the ways in which we say, okay, that goes to the long-term strategic thinking of how are you going to see this place run for 100 years and run successfully. On the short-term side of it, it's far more reactionary. So, over the last handful of years, we've had to deal with the pandemic, we've had to deal with the inflation and interest rates, and those are things that they're sort of, they come up rather quickly, and you have to be able to adapt to them. And so it means changing timing, project strategy to ensure that you can accommodate these fluctuations and changes in the market and not be sort of caught out and in a situation where you'll get in trouble because of them.
Right. Well, I can see the short term being more kind of, as you said, reactionary, like kind of counter steering as you're coming out of corners with, finding traction.
Exactly. Little steering wheel twitch to keep yourself online.
You got it. Yeah. And well, short term, I have to ask you, how have the tariffs been?
Tariffs are unique. I mean, in the sense that it's obviously been everything that everyone's talking about right now. We're seeing a degree of deglobalization going on right now. The opportunities that come from that, though, is that people are now looking to how do we invest in Canada and strengthen our economy at home? How do we protect our jobs locally? How do we make sure that as a country we can stand on our own without being at risk for what's happening in other countries? And so in some respects, yes, it's sort of upsetting things, in terms of construction costing, materials, where you're getting things from. In our case, though, the majority of this is earthworks, it's concrete, it's asphalt. Those are not tariff related or impacted. We're building in a barn vernacular, so our design is all agricultural barns, so that's all Canadian sourced materials. So the tariffs on our construction costs have very little impact themselves, but where we're seeing impact into the positive is that people are starting to look inwards at Canada and saying, hey, how do we support the country from within? How do we create these opportunities to go racing at home? How do we support innovation companies in Ontario? And so with Oro Station, that's a positive outcome in the sense that people are looking at, hey, how do we bolster our economic growth here at home? And Oro fits in perfectly with that.
Right. And you mentioned we have a large automotive sector, right? And a large automotive enthusiast base. So, I mean, it's all kind of harmonious as it's kind of going through.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, we're seeing it even with things like Porsche Experience Center down in Toronto. So Porsche is a large global brand. They would only be making an investment in Ontario and in Toronto on the basis of how big the market is. And that's just one of many indicators of how strong our automotive culture is here. We don't have much in the way of public transit. We've got lots of roads, lots of people drive, and people love their cars. And so there's a real opportunity in that, in the sense that by virtue of both our environment, our economy, we're in a situation where automotive is very at the forefront in our province.
So we've talked about the short-term, the long-term conditions and implications of market cycles. What have you guys been doing to maintain momentum through it all?
Well, I think it's a challenge in terms of what's the best approach to do that. And I think in the past, people have heard about projects like this that have been visions that people have had to build here. But one of the biggest things we've done is act first, in the sense of making sure we've got credibility through delivering the project. So what I mean by that is that where others said, we're going to build a racetrack, they didn't own land. We started by buying the land, and then we went for the zoning, and then we went to the next steps of approval. And we've made sure that our work is always staying ahead of announcements or what people know, so that it's not a question of, could this hypothetically come? You can see the project changing day to day. So we've now got the first building going up. We've got the track almost entirely at subgrade level and graded out, ready for servicing. And so that lends to the credibility of actually being able to see it. It's less about a hypothetical vision saying one day it might happen. When you come out here, you can actually see the changes on site. Sometimes it's faster, sometimes it's slower based on what's going on. But we are working on delivering that credibility of actually getting through the work, putting our steel toes on and getting it done.
Absolutely, and that's important. I mean, there's so much to entrepreneurship that's, vision, planning, this and that, but it seems like you guys are like, we're just going to do the work, and we're going to tell you when things are done, and the needle keeps moving.
Yeah, I think if you get too focused on the hype, and it's something that, I almost shy away from, in the sense that if you're too focused on the hype and not actually delivering results, then at some point in time, you're going to lose steam. If you just focus on the results first, then, whether it's fast or slow, as long as you continue to hit those milestones and things continue to come together, then it's pretty hard for people to challenge whether or not you're actually moving forward. You can see that the project's moving forward and marching towards the inevitable of it being built here.
Yeah, it's one thing to make content about a project. It's the other thing to really get the boots on the ground and digging and moving dirt. And it seems like you've been doing most of that. So
that's the best part. I mean, I have a key to every bulldozer and every rock truck out there on site. And half the time, if I've got some time, I'm in a machine, because there's nothing more fun than being out playing in the giant sandbox, building your own racetrack. So it's getting out and physically doing the work, whether that be sitting through the approval meetings and the engineering, or actually being on site doing things. It's a lot of fun.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. So looking back, were there moments that you thought this might not work?
I think any entrepreneur will tell you that it's a fight, and there are always moments where the doubt creeps in, especially when you're dealing with things like a pandemic or inflation and interest rates, things that are sort of out of your control and you have to adapt to. But watching the community rally around this thing, whether that be anyone from government to the stakeholders and agencies supporting it, what we're going through, both in achieving approvals, but even just being vocal about this being needed in a time in the market, to the general community and what people are talking about and how much they want to see this thing built. It really helps solidify the fact that this thing is coming at the right time in the market. And I mean, we're continuing to see people committing to buying barns and real estate, and tenants coming on. We're announcing new partnerships. And so that continued and sustained momentum, it's a pretty good alleviator of doubt, in the sense that you're on to the right path, that this is a project that's needed at the time in the market. And so we just keep forging ahead and keep working to bring this thing from vision to reality.
Well, it's great to hear, right? No entrepreneurial project's easy, but it seems like, again, you've said you got the support of the community, you've got the tenants coming in, the retailers, and everyone behind it. So the doubt keeps getting minimized, it seems.
Yeah, absolutely. Both through physical progress on the site itself, but also by that community engagement and the number of groups that are coming here to make Oro Station their home.
So for those who haven't seen Oro Station today, what's going on the site? Let us know what happens day to day and how it's looking.
So right now we're going through a lot of earthworks. I mean, I think it's interesting when you see how much earth we're moving. One day to the next, when you drive by, it just all looks like dirt, but in fact, we're moving mountains of it. So we have stripped the topsoil off the north farm. We're now working on the south farm, which is the south half of the circuit itself. We've removed about 40 acres worth of trees and had to process all of that as we're working through. But what we're doing is taking off the topsoil, regrading, and bringing the track up to elevations of subgrade before we start digging in the services. And the services are anything from your stormwater pipes, your catch basins, your conduits, anything that runs below the track surface itself. That's what the team's prepping for right now, is getting ready to start trenching. And then we've now got the barn. So that first barn is being framed, and we've got the roof, trusses are coming and the roof will be going up on it soon. But we're excited to show it so that people see, what the final built form is going to look like. And then in terms of what's happening within Oro Station itself and within the club, is that community I mentioned is really starting to take shape. So we've already seen members that are joining, people that are committing to these condos, tenants that are committing to their spaces within the park. And in fact, we're at 300,000 square feet out of our available 500,000 square feet has already been committed to in the campus. Wow. And so that community element, members of the club, they're starting to spend time together. They're coming up here, they're coming to see the track, they're going to events together.
Right.
And it's really fun to see that community taking shape that will ultimately call Oro home.
That's exciting. Very exciting. Like you said, there's a lot of moving dirt, but it's engineered movement of dirt.
Absolutely.
But in parallel, the members are already starting to kind of familiarize with the community and themselves and the space.
Yeah, just to give you a sense of the volume of it, the topsoil pile that you can see out there from the road right now is 22,000 truckloads worth that we've stacked up into our little topsoil mountain.
Right.
And all that material that was removed has been replaced with compacted engineered fill that's graded, GPS leveled, etc. So it all still looks like dirt, but it's whole new dirt.
Right. And this is in the interest of creating a great track, right? This is not just your local, hey, we just put some asphalt down and you have a circuit, right? You're really building a special circuit here at Oro.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've gone through the FIA accreditation process, so we're an FIA grade 3 circuit. And so it is something that we took the design very seriously, and we're working to build something that was a world-class facility. FIA's rating at class 3 is designed for GT cars, but that's the type of cars that will be using the circuit the most. And so we've been very intentional with that.
Let's talk more about the design of the track. What is the experience of driving on Oro Station? What is the planning? What do you want people to feel when they get out there?
Yeah, well, I mean, we were very fortunate to have a fantastic track designer in Ben Wilshire and his team at Driven International in the UK. They're a younger firm that's making quite a name in the motorsport world. And when Ben and I started through the design process of the circuit, he came over here to walk the land and to really look at the topography and understand, how are we going to design a circuit that's going to best utilize the property itself. So I'm really, really glad with how it's come out and what he's done to accentuate the elevations, the areas of interest, and to make it a really dynamic circuit. But in terms of the actual track design, so I mentioned that we were FIA grade 3, so that means that it's designed for GT cars. So any of your race series like Porsche Cup, Ferrari Challenge, IMSA and the GT Pro and the Michelin Pilot Series, that's sort of your typical type of racing that could happen out here on the circuit. And we did it that way so that it maintained a good sense of scale and feel. Like if you build an F1 tracks, those safety runoffs are the size of football fields. For ours, it's a lot more intimate. So you've got a lot more grass, you've got a lot more areas that make it look like a pretty serene place when you're just doing everyday club driving. But the track itself, I mean, I mentioned Ben walking through and trying to figure out what was the best layout for it. The approach we took was that it had to function kind of like a golf course. If you want to go out and play golf and have a leisurely day with your friends, you can play the white tee box and you'll enjoy your day and it'll be fun. If you go and play from the black tips on the tee box, it's going to get really complicated really fast. And so the idea there was that in order to keep Oro engaging, it was the kind of track that you could drive it in a vintage car, have a lot of fun, some smooth flowing sections, some high speed sections that would make for a really good driving experience. But the minute you try to start setting lap records, it gets harder and harder to find that rhythm on the circuit to be able to set your best times. So for every second you shave off, it becomes incrementally more difficult to find that time.
Right. So it seems like you're designing something to be an ongoing challenge, an ongoing discovery even for
Absolutely.
Drivers, right?
Yeah, and I think we saw it, Karun Chandok, the former F1 driver and now Sky Sports announcer, he's part of our design team and he's actually a member at the facility. Believe it or not, he's married to a Canadian from Toronto. But with Karun, he went going through and looking at the circuit itself and the simulators when we were working through some of the design testing, and he said it was addictive because laps that he thought were personal best weren't even close,
Right.
and laps that he thought he'd screwed something up, he was suddenly setting his own records. And so it was something that was continually keeping him engaged to come back for more because of the way the track had been designed and the layout of it, so that it's something that you won't get bored with easily.
Right, that's awesome. So we talked a little bit about the club. Can we go back to that and tell me a bit more about who are the members of Bexley Motor Club?
So the prototypical members that you see, I mean, these are very similar to the golf courses around Ontario. These are people that have done well in life. They're now enjoying their hobby and passion, getting out racing, and they're looking for a community. And so the people that have been joining, the members that are coming here, they're looking forward to being around other racers, other people that love their cars. But I'd say more than anything, it's about access to the track. So when you look traditionally, you've got to book your track days, sometimes years in advance here in Ontario. With the way we've structured up Oro, the members of Bexley are on track 15 sessions a month. And so they've got a lot more access and opportunity to come and drive whenever it suits their schedule. So whether that be on a Saturday morning, they want to get out and do some racing, or if they've got a meeting cancellation, they've got a lot of access to be out there on that circuit. And so these members that are coming here, they want to drive more. And whether that be on the track itself, or even driving their classic cars in the region, or even just working on their cars around like-minded individuals. I think, for some of them, they've had garages on their farms where they keep all their cars and their friends come over a couple times a year, but otherwise that building stays empty. Now they're coming to Oro where they've got neighbors all along that are all there with their cars, and puts them in a community of like-minded people.
Right, so tell me more then about the culture that you see kind of forming as Oro comes to life.
Well, I mentioned that there are patrons, so their involvement is what brings that facility to life. Them joining is how we pay for the construction of the track. And so they're a really critical part to the whole thing. But in terms of what that culture looks like, for me, I love being able to pass the passion down. So in the same way that I was put into cars as a kid, and that's what gave me that infection to love cars so much, I want that for the next generation. And so the members that have been coming, they're the types that if they see a 10-year-old by their car, they'd open the door and put them in there. And that child is either going to become a future driver or a mechanic or something, but they're getting a chance to have that same passion that is now the hobby that our members enjoy. And so, while we see them having this great community of like-minded individuals, and being patrons to the facility, but their ambassadorship to car enthusiasts everywhere, I think is something that's is going to be a really cool part of the culture of what Oro Station is. So it's something I'm really looking forward to in terms of being able to create a community of people that love racing, love their cars, and want to be able to share that with the next generation.
Absolutely. I like how you said sharing it with the next generation. And again, the community that you have. You have the different ecosystem of things happening at the track. Like you said, paddock A is this, paddock B is that. There's on-track action, there's off-track action. I mean, the culture you're fostering is really integral.
Absolutely.
To passing down that passion.
Yeah, when I described to you the different areas of the site, the west side of the property being the club, I mean, it is a quieter side of the property, but the members have the opportunity to both engage within that campus itself, but even from the campus, you can see the track. So there's a restaurant that overlooks the circuit. So, while members have their own quiet space where their cars are, the campus still sees that racetrack. Things are still going on. They're still, they can pick and choose how engaged they want to be. But whether it be between car shows or events or things that are happening in that campus, you're going to find a lot of opportunity to be part of that wider automotive community.
Now let's double click on that innovation campus. Who are the companies and tenants that you see coming to Oro Station?
So it's a mix in the sense that, I've sort of quantified them into a few different buckets, but you've got your traditional automotive suppliers in the sense of your car detailing, your tire shop, your oil change. Another tier would be in the performance shops. So whether that's suspension, engine builders, classic car restorers, we've actually got a couple of race teams that are coming in with their own garages as well. We've got innovation and tech companies, so EV, autonomous, hydrogen, alternative energy, looking at the future of automotive and what does transportation look like in the next 50 years. And then we've got the education with Georgian College, who are building that automotive service tech campus that will be focused in part on EVs, but we're also looking at offering a motorsport tech and a classic car restoration program there. which is a really important component because for the very businesses of the campus, now you have students that are the future employees of those businesses coming right out of the college, right into opportunities on property. So not only do those tenants have clients on property in the club, they've also got future employees and labor coming directly out of the school. But I think one of the parts I think people are most excited for are the auxiliary uses that surround it. So whether that's the cafe or the restaurant that overlooks the track, we're looking at a museum going into there. And so it's something that, you know, they're all related around automotive, but they hit different elements of it and they all work really well together. So you will see, as I mentioned, people coming in to get winter tires put in their car, but going to the museum while they're waiting. And so it's going to be a pretty dynamic spot.
Right. Well, like you said, it's an ecosystem, it's a community, and you almost have a feeder series of your own for the industry, really, with Georgian College in the mix and then all the other facilities on site. You almost have like a feeder of talent.
Yeah, well, I mean, and part of that whole is to say the ecosystem approach. How do you create something that's a bit symbiotic in the sense that it helps support itself? So the companies within there are supporting each other. The school is supporting their success. The members are supporting their success. The wider community is supporting it. And so all of that working together is how we build a 100-year facility out of Oro Station.
You mentioned Georgian. Who are the other standout tenants that have committed to Oro Station?
Well, I think they're all standout tenants, but I mean, there are some that are certainly more recognizable than others. So for example, we're going to be opening the first ever Saybelt factory store on property. We've recently announced a partnership with Gulf Race Fuels. So if you remember the iconic Gulf brand, we are now selling Gulf Race Fuel on the property.
That's awesome.
So you know there's others that are all up there on the website, and we'll be continuing to be announcing some new and pretty exciting ones. A few that we can't talk about, complements of NDAs that are in the fairly larger manufacturer space, but it's a really interesting intersection of companies that are coming in there, and you continue to see them being announced through the website and through our social channels as they're ready to announce their participation.
Right. Well, as we said earlier, you guys are doing the work. You'll catch up on the media hype later, but it seems like you got some big names that must be exhilarating and just invigorating, really, for the whole team to have those brands and those heritage names put their faith in you and Oro Station.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think they see what we're doing that's different. They see what we're doing to accommodate the future of the sport, as well as, you know, whether the sport, the hobby, or even the automotive innovation. And so we're honored to have them along with us on the journey. And I think, you know, the enthusiast child in me it's pretty wild to see, you know, the Gulf brand now on our property. It's something I used to have a Hot Wheels car in the Gulf colors. So seeing their signs now up on the property is quite surreal, to be honest. Yeah.
So that's a lot of cool brands committing to Oro Station. Let's talk about events. What's that going to look like when this is all built out and ready for the community?
So, I mean, we've touched a little bit on some of what the events would look like in terms of the weekends, cars and coffee that are in the paddocks, etc. But Oro Station generally, as a facility, has not been designed to compete with, say, Mosport. Mosport is your big spectator, big event, a lot of tickets, a lot of people that are there on property. Oro's got a lot more of an intimate feel to it. So while we can accommodate races and we can host them from time to time, you'll see events be on a smaller scale. So it'll be more like product launches or brand unveilings of cars, or, you know, team announcements, or things of that nature. And then when there are races there, you're going to see high quality broadcasts, but less bodies on the site itself. I mean, if we had designed it to accommodate those spectators, you end up with massive areas for parking and for infrastructure and security and fencing and things of that nature. But we wanted it to have a much more sort of authentic feeling of a historic set of courtyards and compounds. And so we took the approach that we'd be able to do that sort of broadcast and high quality events on smaller scale, but made sure that we could keep that design language intact.
Right. Well, you mentioned design language there. I'm very curious. What is the kind of architectural approach? How is this being designed?
Well, I mean, being the son of an architect, the value of good design really means something to me. And so if you look in the UK, for example, a lot of those historic tracks like Goodwood or the facility at Bicester Heritage, now called Bicester Motion, they've got some incredible historic buildings that really tie into it. With us, because of where we are in a rural area just north of Toronto, we've taken on a very barn vernacular to the design. And so the barns, all of this is meant to look like a series of sort of equestrian, agricultural type courtyards and paddock areas. And so you get a sense of scale and heritage to the actual facility that I think is going to be a really powerful statement that gives it a sense of place and presence, that when you walk in, you're not just sort of walking into a cold, functional facility of steel buildings, but instead something that's got a degree of a historic look to it and a real sense of place and presence.
That's awesome. I really like how you're calling it courtyards and barns, and I mean, you're staying away from the cold, oh, it's an automotive industrial business park, to it feels like an equestrian grounds where, you know, you've got these barns, they're familiar and a bit warmer of an environment, and no giant parking lots that you have to, you know, traverse across to get to anywhere.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, the barn find has been something that's nostalgic in everyone, right? And I mean, you can imagine a day at Oro Station where fog lifting, garage door opens in a barn and out pops a historic race car on its way out to the track. It would be such an incredible and powerful, visual when you're thinking in that way. But the architecture being agricultural, it pays an homage to the region and where we are. I mean, Oro Medante's slogan is "Proud Heritage, Exciting Future," and that's very much what we're doing. Yeah. We're very focused on the exciting future of Oro Station and our involvement here in the community, while making sure our design fits in with the region is something to be very proud of, something that looks like it's always been here. And I think it's going to be a really cool look, and I can't wait for the first barn to get it siding up so that people get a sense of that and they get to see, you know, what the textures look like, the coloring, how the barns come together. So that's going to be a pretty powerful visual in the next month or two.
Now let's talk about the next 1 or 2 years at Oro Station. What's coming online soon?
So, I mean, as we mentioned, construction's ongoing out there in terms of earthworks and grading and getting ready for us to move from just pushing dirt around and setting up the site to the subgrade to actually digging in the underground services. We've got the barn that I mentioned is coming up. So the walls are up now. We're getting ready to put the roof on. And I'm really looking forward to having that building open and operational this summer. But generally, you're going to see things going on during the construction. So things like members are coming up and they're doing events and they're creating that community and that bond amongst themselves. We've got some experiential marketing happening on the site. So Lamborghini's been out before, they're coming back yet again and going off-roading. We've got a few different OEMs that are looking at opportunities to go out and do these experiential type events during the construction of the facility itself. And then as a group at Oro Station, we're working on a number of events sort of with that wider automotive community. So we've now taken over stewardship of Hot August Nights, which is a classic car show up at Weber's on Highway 11 in August. So there's typically 400 cars that attend per night there on each of those Tuesdays. And we're really looking forward to now being the hosts and continuing what the founders, Jim Pearsall and family, have created up there. And as well as a number of events you'll see popping up here and there, you know, whether they're on our property or at other automotive events in Ontario that you'll see us being present at. So, you know, construction is one element and we're carrying through that, but you're going to start seeing that community forming and the type of stuff we're talking about being part of that ultimate vision happening in the interim.
Well, that's really exciting. You know, everyone's waiting for the project to be completed, but it's like, hey, we already have pieces that we're going to start doing now and giving you sort of a little feeling of what's to come.
Absolutely. I mean, we talk about Oro Station as building a new home for automotive enthusiasts. That doesn't mean that the automotive enthusiasts don't exist. They're around now. Right. So,
well said.
You know, we're going to be engaging with everyone while we're working our way through the actual building the home. It's there's still a community to serve in the meantime.
That's awesome. So let's zoom out for a second. What are the trends that you see shaping the automotive industry over the next decade?
There's a lot of things happening. I think that one thing with the automotive industry is that it's in a state of rapidly evolving change. So historically, car models changed incrementally 1% per year. Now you're seeing whole new technologies coming out year per year. So where automotive's headed generally is sort of a question to be answered. What does low carbon future look like? What does autonomous driving look like? What's going to be, you know, how are our kids going to be interacting with cars as transportation? But as part of that, what we're seeing is classic cars and motorsports. I mean, a lot of these supercars now, they can blow through the speed limits in second gear. And so where do you actually get a chance to enjoy them? You have to be on private property. In the case of some classic cars, I mean, there's talk about them being relegated off of the road. So 120 years ago, everyone rode their horses to work. Now you have to go to a horse farm if you want to be on a horse. I think we're going to see something similar, particularly with the vintage cars and, you know, the race cars as well, in that you're going to have to find private property to be able to enjoy that type of hobby. So we're hoping that Oro is going to fit in well in terms of being a venue for that, so that people's passion can be able to continue on into the future.
Yeah, well, I like what you're doing with the whole kind of campus in a way that you're servicing the historics and the classics and the motorsport side, but you're also talking about the autonomy and the innovation and the tech. I mean, that just doesn't come out of thin air. That needs a facility, that needs a dedicated place for testing and that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, I think, and even, you know, some of them is obscure in the sense that one of our tenants coming in is doing the recycling tires. So they turn them into non-combustible petroleum products. They'll have an R&D lab that takes our used tires from the circuit, shreds them on site. And that ties into the FIA environmental accreditation that we've pursued. So it's something that we're passionate about, looking at, you know, what are these different trends? What's this future look like? How do we play a part in that? Another tenant is looking at creating a fuel research lab. So they're working on low carbon fuels, sustainable fuels, so that you are still able to run your historic cars. It's just now with a carbon neutral petroleum. And so you're still answering that question of how do we reduce carbon impacts in the environment, but also drive these cars that are not made to be EV. And so we're excited to see that type of innovation that's not even just addressing the future of transportation, but it's even solving existing problems in the industry. You know, how do you create mining equipment that is carbon neutral? It's kind of tough to do EVs in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
So you got to find a way to run petroleum in a better format. And I think we'll see a lot of that innovation happening on the property.
All right, so we've zoomed out, now let's zoom back in. What does Oro Station mean locally?
So, I mean, obviously the employment that comes with this is going to have a real tangible impact in terms of the region. Oro-Medonte is a rural municipality, but we're only an hour from Toronto. Often these tracks, you find them are 4 or 5 hours from population in the middle of nowhere. It's very rare to be this close to such an urban center, which is strong in terms of the employment that can come here locally. It's strong in terms of what it's going to do for the region in terms of quality of jobs. But it's not just Oro Station. So we're seeing things like Simcoe County has purchased the road that we're on and is now turning it into County Road 127, connecting over to the highway. So it's now a regional road in front of us. And we talked a bit about the airport and some of the excitement over there, but they're in the midst of a $65 million infrastructure expansion that's now leading to new tenants coming in and new announcements. An example of that is Orange, the medevac. They just announced in the fall that they're investing $93 million into the airport. So in part, you know, we don't take the credit for that in the sense that there's an element of momentum, but it's not just us. The region's growing, and I think that this growth that's complementary, that's high quality employment and jobs, it's going to have a real impact in the region around us. And we're very much looking forward to how that has positive benefits to the community.
Absolutely, and it ties back into what you said about planning this for 100 years. This isn't a short-term project, a townhome, you give people the keys, you walk away. You are planning for a strategic involvement in growth in this region.
Yeah, absolutely. And we want to be a core piece of that. In the same way that the airport is a big piece of infrastructure, you wouldn't typically think of a motorsport circuit as a piece of infrastructure. But given the innovation, given the type of ecosystem that's going to be there for employment, education, innovation, we want this thing to be a real asset to the province of Ontario and to Canada. And so that it becomes a place that it's not just having impacts within the property itself, but regional, provincial, and even national impacts to the industries that it's part of.
So Jeff, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for the insights, and it's really exciting to see what's going on. I just have one last question for you. If you're going to describe Oro Station not as a place, but a philosophy, what is that to you?
Oro Station is the apex of art and engineering. It's where motoring traditions are formed. It's a catalyst for innovation. And it's a place that welcomes enthusiasts to the new Canadian home of all things automotive.
That's awesome. Okay, so as we wrap up, please tell them, what can people do to support and be in touch with Oro Station today?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we were going through all the approval process, we were pretty quiet about what we were doing, but we're now at a stage where we're engaging with the community. We have prospective members coming up here for tours. We have these events that we talked about coming up. And I think it's time, you know, we look forward to hearing from the community about how they want to be involved. Follow along on socials, attend the events, come be your part in putting your stamp in what this place will be to the community here in Ontario.
That's awesome. Well, thank you again, Jeff. It's really been exciting to learn more about the vision, the project, the milestones, and everybody at home, please follow Oro Station, get in touch with Geoffrey and the team. They're doing a great job here, bringing us the future of automotive.
Yeah, thank you.